Why did my mother have to leave me? Because ever since she left, my life has been a living nightmare. My name is Amanda, and this is the story of how my stepmother sold me off to a rich woman trafficker. I grew up in what you could call a perfect home, at least for the first 14 years of my life. We lived in a modest but beautiful house in a quiet part of town. My father, Mr. James, was a hard-working man, always smiling, always making silly jokes that made my mother and me laugh so hard our stomachs would hurt. My mother, Mrs. Anita, was the kind of woman you'd wish for as a mum, soft-spoken, beautiful, and kind. She had this laugh that could brighten any dark day. Our life was simple, but it was full of love. I was their only child, and trust me, they treated me like a princess. Not the spoiled type-o. No, the love type. Every Sunday, we would all sit outside on the veranda, sipping Zobo and teasing each other about who had the biggest head. My father would always say, "Amanda, your head fit carry full bag of rice." And my mother would laugh until tears came out of her eyes. I thought life would always be like that. Until the accident. It happened on a rainy evening. The kind of rain that sounds like war on the roof. Mum had gone out to the market to buy ingredients for my favorite soup, aguzi and pounded yam, because I had just passed my junior WEC exams. I was waiting at home, dancing around, already dreaming about the big bowl of soup I was going to devour. But instead of my mother's familiar knock, what we got was a knock from one of our neighbors, Mr. Sola, his face pale and shaking like a leaf. "Amanda, James, there's been an accident." Those words shattered our lives forever. Mum's car had skidded off the road and crashed into a tree. She didn't make it. Just like that, the woman who kissed my forehead every night was gone. I remember crying until I physically couldn't cry anymore. My father, that strong man I always looked up to, broke down completely. I saw him cry like a baby in the middle of the sitting room, pounding his fists on the floor and screaming her name. We were broken. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but the pain didn't go anywhere. I tried to be strong for Daddy, but inside, I was just a scared, lost 14-year-old girl who wanted her mother back. At first, Daddy and I clung to each other. He became my world, and I became his. We did everything together. He would even plait my hair. You can imagine how rough the hair used to look. But I would laugh and tell him he was the best hairstylist in town. But slowly, things started to change. It started with a woman named Stacy. At first, she was just Daddy's friend. She would come around once in a while, bringing food and smiling too much. You know that type of smile that looks like I'm pretending to like you? That was Stacy. I didn't like her, but I kept quiet. After all, she never did anything openly bad to me, until she started staying longer, and laughing louder at Daddy's jokes, and wearing clothes that were just, somehow. Daddy started spending less time with me. He stopped helping with homework. He stopped asking if I'd eaten. He would always say, "Amanda, I'm busy," or "Amanda, go and watch TV." I started feeling like a stranger in my own house. Then, one evening, Daddy dropped the bombshell. "Amanda, I have something to tell you," he said, avoiding my eyes. "I'm getting married to Stacy." I sat there, frozen. It was like someone poured cold water on my body. Married? To that woman? I wanted to scream, to beg him not to do it. But what could I say? He already looked like he had made up his mind. So, with tears in my eyes and a fake smile on my lips, I said, "Congratulations, Daddy." And just like that, Stacy moved in. At first, she pretended to be sweet, calling me dear and sweetheart and giving me forced hugs that made my skin crawl. But the moment Daddy wasn't around, her real face came out. She would beat me for no reason. If I didn't sweep the house on time, slap. If I didn't greet her with enough respect, hot slap. If I dared talk back, belt. At one point, she made me kneel outside the gate because I mistakenly broke a plate. Neighbors would pass and shake their heads, but nobody said anything. You know how people like to mind their business in Nigeria. Whenever Daddy was home, she would act like she was the nicest woman alive, cooking special meals, laughing at everything, massaging his shoulders. Me? I became invisible. But one thing about life, karma never misses a dress. One day, I fell seriously ill. Malaria, typhoid, everything joined together. I was burning with fever. I couldn't eat, couldn't even sit up. Daddy became very worried. He rushed me to the hospital, stayed by my side, holding my hand, feeding me pap when I couldn't even hold a spoon. For the first time in months, I saw the old Daddy again. And Stacy? Oh, she hated it. I would catch her throwing side eyes when Daddy wasn't looking. She would hiss and stomp around like a wounded goat. When I finally got better, things improved a little. Daddy started paying more attention to me again. He even promised to take me to the beach once I was stronger. But that just made Stacy even angrier. One night, when I was pretending to be asleep, I overheard her on the phone. Yes, she's strong now, but I need her out of this house. You know what to do. I didn't understand what she meant. I wish I had. It happened 2 days later. Daddy traveled for a business trip to Abuja. Stacy told me to follow her to visit her sister in another town. I was suspicious, but what could I do? I was just a teenager. On the way, they covered my eyes, saying it was a surprise trip and I shouldn't peek. Before I knew what was happening, I was bundled into a strange house. And that was the beginning of my nightmare. I was sold like a piece of property. I cried. I screamed. I begged. But nobody listened. The night I was sold, the sky was pitch black. Heavy clouds swallowed the moonlight, and the world seemed to echo my helplessness. Stacy gripped my arm with painful force, pushing me into the waiting car where a strange man sat, smoking a thick cigar, his eyes void of any emotion. My heart pounded against my ribs, but I was too shocked to scream, too betrayed to fight. As the car sped away, Stacy didn't even glance back. It was just the beginning of my nightmare. We arrived at a desolate building at the edge of nowhere. The air smelled of rotting wood and stale sweat. I was shoved out roughly, where other girls, young, dirty, trembling, huddled together like wounded animals. The next few days became a blur of horror. We were packed into trucks, blindfolded, pushed from one vehicle to another like livestock. Whenever they stopped, I hoped it was over. But each time, it was only to be transferred to another nightmare. No names were spoken. No kindness was shown. Food was a rare luxury. Water was even rarer. When we cried for water, a guard would hurl a bucket toward us. Filthy, barely drinkable. Desperate, me and the other girls would fight savagely for share. Nails clawed at skin. Teeth tore into flesh. I was weak from hunger. I barely fought back. I curled into myself, shielding my ribs as fists and elbows flew around me. Sometimes, the fights turned deadly. One evening, after a particularly vicious scuffle over a scrap of bread, I saw 2 girls, no older than myself, lying motionless, blooded, and still. Their bodies were dragged out casually, like broken dolls, and dumped somewhere I couldn't see. I was so scared. The stench of unwashed bodies and human waste thickened the air. We were locked in abandoned, crumbling buildings where rats scurried in the corners and there were no toilets, just a hole in the ground, if anything at all. Every few days, we were blindfolded and moved again, deeper and deeper into places where hope couldn't find them. I lost all sense of time. My body grew gaunt, my cheeks hollowed. My stomach cramped painfully from days without food. My voice grew hoarse from silent crying. Some nights, when I thought no one could hear, I would pray, desperate, broken prayers, to a God I wasn't even sure was listening. And then came the final move. The truck rattled and bumped down an endless dirt road before stopping in front of what looked like a massive warehouse. My legs barely held me up as we were all herded out like cattle. I stumbled, catching myself against another girl who shoved me away, panicked and feral. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, the air heavy and metallic. We were all lined up like exhibits in a grotesque market. My heart slammed against her chest as she was pushed to join them, my arms trembling. In front of us stood a large man, well-dressed, with a stomach that jutted over his belt and heavy gold rings on his fingers. His presence reeked of power and cruelty. Beside him sat a younger man, Damien, about 18 years old, with dark hair and a clean, sharp jawline. But unlike the older man, the boy looked uneasy. His arms were crossed, his brows furrowed, his mouth a hard line. He seemed like he didn't want to be here and looked disapproving at everything that was happening here. The older man, Mr. Grayson they called him, began inspecting us like merchandise. He moved slowly, his heavy boots thudding against the concrete floor. His eyes crawled over each gull with a disgusting hunger, occasionally barking commands. Turn around. Let me see your backside. Smile for me. I swayed where I stood, the world tilting dangerously. Hunger gnawed at my insides. Sweat matted my hair to my forehead. My vision blurred at the edges. As I staggered, my knees almost giving way, I felt a pair of eyes lock onto me. It was Damien. The young man watched me more intently now, a flash of concern crossing his face. Among all the weary, broken girls, he looked particularly at me like I was fragile than the rest. Damien then rushed to the older man and whispered, "Father, please, I think there's been a mix-up. The girl over there, she looks too young. Please confirm her age," pointing at me. I didn't even notice they all seemed older than me. Grayson's greedy gaze turned to me. He grunted, amused. He walked up to me and spoke, "How old are you?" "I am 16, I stammered. "She's underage," Damien protested. Grayson's face darkened immediately. He turned sharply to his men. "I told you, no underage. Are you all deaf or just stupid?" The guard stammered, apologizing profusely. Grayson barely listened, too disgusted by the mistake that could get him into serious trouble. He waved a dismissive hand. "Get her out of the lineup. She's no good for now." Turning to his son, he muttered, "Take her to the house. She can work as a maid or something until she grows up." Damien nodded stiffly, but inside, a storm was brewing. His jaw clenched as he moved toward me. As he reached his hands out to me, I flinched, expecting another slap or shove. Instead, Damien's voice was low, almost gentle. "Come on," he said, barely meeting my eyes. I followed, too weak to resist, too numb to even cry anymore, until finally, I was taken to the mansion. Damien's family mansion was a world away from the filth and terror she had known the past few weeks. But it didn't feel like salvation. Not yet. I was given a cramped room in the servants' quarters, with nothing but a thin mattress and a bucket for bathing. I was ordered to clean, mop, scrub. I barely spoke to anyone. I barely spoke at all. Still, compared to the horror I'd escaped, it was paradise. Damien didn't speak to me much at first. Only when necessary. A nod here, a brief order there. When I arrived, I expected the worst. I braced myself for it. But days passed, and Damien never touched me. At first, I thought it was a trick. I stayed awake at night, clutching my blanket, waiting for him to burst in. But he never did. But slowly, quietly, things began to change. One evening, after a long day of scrubbing floors, I returned to my tiny room to find a plate of steaming rice and stew waiting for her by the door. No note, no explanation. The next night, a clean set of clothes appeared. At first, I thought it was a mistake, or maybe a cruel trick. But the pattern continued. Little kindnesses, small mercies. Then, one night, as I sat on my bed, nibbling at the food, there was a soft knock at her door. I froze. "It's me," came Damien's voice from the other side. I hesitated, unsure whether to answer. My throat was dry, my heart pounding. "I just wanted to see if you're settling in," he said awkwardly. I mumbled a small, almost inaudible thank you. A pause. "You don't have to be scared here," he said. "No one's going to hurt you again." Amanda said nothing. I didn't know if I believed him. But for the first time in weeks, a tiny flicker of something warm, something I hadn't felt in so long, sparked in my chest. Hope. I started opening up a little. Told him about my mother, about my dreams of becoming a broadcaster someday. 2 years later. I was 18 now. In those 2 years, Damien became the only person I trusted. He treated me like a human being, not a possession. Like a sister? No, like a friend. We shared awkward conversations that eventually grew into real ones. I told him about my dreams, how I had wanted to go to school, how I had once dreamed of becoming a journalist, traveling the world, telling stories that mattered. Damien listened. Really listened. When his father fell ill, some sickness that slowly withered him from the inside. I watched quietly from the sidelines as Damien took control. He handled the estate, the business, everything. And when Mr. Grayson finally died, Damien didn't just inherit his wealth. He inherited his sins. But Damien was different. The first thing he did was dismantle his father's trafficking operations. He freed all the girls who had been trapped. He closed the dirty warehouses. He cleaned the family name of the trafficking business. And then, he turned to me. "You once said you wanted to go to school," he said one afternoon, over tea. I blinked at him, confused. "I'm sending you," Damien said simply. "Anywhere you want. I'll pay for everything." My hands trembled around her teacup. "Why would you do that for me?" I whispered. Damien gave a small, crooked smile. "Because you deserve it, Amanda. You deserve a life." I didn't realize I was crying until he reached across the table and wiped a tear from my cheek. "No more sadness, Amanda," he said. "Only beginnings." I started school, and before long, we fell in love. Real love. The kind of love I thought only existed in Hollywood films. One evening, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the garden, I felt Damien step beside her. The sunset bathed us in gold. Without thinking, I turned to him. Our faces were inches apart. I could see every tiny fleck of brown in his eyes. My heart raced. "Amanda," Damien whispered, his voice thick with emotion. And then he kissed me. It was tentative at first, hesitant, an unspoken question hanging between them. But when I responded, melting into him, it deepened into something fierce and real, built on years of silent affection, loyalty, and shared survival. When I graduated, he proposed to me, not with a flashy engagement, but in the most sincere way. Under the big mango tree in our compound, he went on one knee and said, "Amanda, you gave me a reason to be a better man. Will you marry me?" I said yes, crying and laughing at the same time. We got married in a beautiful ceremony. Small, intimate, just close friends. Together, we built a media company. I became one of the top broadcasters in the country. Damien left all shady dealings and started legitimate businesses. Life was good. Until that fateful day. We were preparing for a huge partnership meeting with some investors. Damien said, "Babe, we need to impress them all. No forming shy girl today." I laughed and teased him. "No voila, myoga." We walked into the meeting room, and there, sitting across the table, were my father and Stacy. The moment our eyes met, you could have heard a pin drop. Daddy turned pale. Stacy's mouth hung open like a broken door. I felt my heart slam against my chest. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Then Daddy stammered, "Amanda? Is it really you?" Tears welled up in my eyes. I nodded slowly. "It's me, Daddy. I'm alive." He burst into tears. Right there in the boardroom. Stacy tried to stand up and run, but Damien's bodyguards blocked the door. You should have seen the way she was shaking like fowl that fell inside water. Later, Daddy and I sat down privately. I told him everything. How Stacy sold me. How I suffered. How I survived. Daddy wept and apologized over and over. He said he never forgave himself for abandoning me emotionally after my mom died. He blamed himself for letting Stacy into our lives. As for Stacy, she was arrested on the spot. Turns out, she had been involved in all sorts of criminal activities. Not just selling me. She had sold other girls too. She's still rotting in Kirikiri prison till today. As for me and Daddy, we rebuilt our relationship slowly. It wasn't easy, but love covers a multitude of sins. Today, I have a beautiful life. A husband who adores me. A father who cherishes me. A successful career. And every time I stand in front of the camera, delivering the news to millions, I remember the little girl who was almost lost forever. And I smile. Because even in the darkest story, there can still be a beautiful ending.